All right, I want to wrap up talking about short-term and working memory by talking about a really influential model for how um, a lot of people tend to think about this. This model by Mark Baddeley that I'm going to talk about, won't go into too much detail, but I at least want to make you aware of it. Thinks of working memory as some interrelated systems that allow you to manipulate different kinds of information at the same time, basically. Again, there's lots of disagreement among different researchers about how this works, but probably the most influential model is the appropriately named working memory model by Mark Baddeley. And it suggests that working memory is more or less made up of these four interrelated systems, one of which kind of directs what's going on in the other ones, and they're all connected to long-term memory in a way too. So your central executive basically is your attention or your awareness of what's going on in your memory. And of course, we'll talk about it a bit more in a minute, but long-term memory are the things that you're storing outside of your working memory, right? The things you can call up, things about your childhood or what happened last week or even what happened this morning that you haven't been rehearsing. They're just things that you know or remember. And the interfaces between this long-term memory and your attention, your central executive, are these different specialized sorts of memory systems. The phonological loop is very similar to your echoic memory that we talked about in sensory memory. Your phonological loop is your memory of what you just heard, basically. Um, so most people suggested this is like a 2 second loop. Have you ever, for example, someone asks you a question and you go, "What?" And then you all of a sudden know what they asked. You really didn't hear them the first time. So you ask them what, and then you feel kind of silly because you're like, "Oh, never mind, I got it." That's your phonological loop working that you have about a 2 second sort of delayed loop of what you just heard that is playing in your head, basically. You can make it go longer if you're rehearsing it, but you sort of have that 2 second delay where you might catch things that you missed the first time. Very similarly, the visual spatial sketchpad is a metaphor for the way that we remember, well, visual and spatial information. That you can kind of manipulate things in your mind's eye. You can uh, think about what things look like. You can kind of simulate what it would be like to manipulate things, turn them around, stretch them out. You can think about where things are in relation to each other, like in a map that you kind of generate in your mind. That's all things that you are doing on your visual spatial sketchpad. The episodic buffer is more like the events that you're calling up from your long-term memory. Kind of a shorter, another loop in a sense, this buffer of things that you call to mind about what you remember about your first day of high school or your wedding day, these different things that you might be able to pull from long-term memory. So you see these arrows going in both directions because you can pull things from your long-term memory and you can kind of try to commit new memories to the long-term memory by uh, uh, you know committing new events to your long-term memory or thinking about new information about where things are in relation to one another or whatever it happens to be. And your central executive is directing all that attention and directing all of those processes in one way. So again, the central executive is your shifting attention, basically. You might maybe more abstractly think about your central executive as like your consciousness in a sense, that you are shifting where that is going. But we'll talk more about consciousness in our consciousness unit soon. Um, there also, it's important to note, are individual differences in how good people are at doing this. The better you are at shifting your attention and keeping things going on those different systems of the working memory, you would have higher working memory capacity if you're better at keeping things in these places and shifting your attention among them. That tends to be something that we might call intelligence in a sense too. People with high working memory capacity are frequently referred to as intelligent and might do better than people with low working memory capacity on different intelligence assessments. Again, another topic we're going to get to soon. And people with high working memory capacity also have a lot of other abilities that are maybe unsurprising. They're good at school activities, because they're able to manipulate a lot of ideas and combine them and put them in and out of their long-term memory. They're good at taking other people's perspectives. This is maybe also one of the reasons that children are not particularly good at this, because their working memory capacity is not really developed yet. They're not really adept at switching their attention, so it's hard to take their focus off themselves. Learning a second language also related to this, because you have to manipulate two symbolic systems basically and see how they're related and how they're not. Resisting impulsive behavior, thinking about how to tamp down those immediate sort of urges or impulses requires some attention and control. And of course, controlling whether your mind is wandering. It's unsurprisingly related to how good you are at shifting your attention. So again, not everyone's working memory works exactly the same. Some people have more capacity, some people have less. It is like many things, a spectrum where a lot of people probably tend to be in the middle there. Okay, shifting from those shorter term or more like flexible stores of short term and working memory, let's talk about long term memory and then talk about some different types of memories again. So long-term memory, we might refer to as a relatively permanent store. And I say relatively because you don't remember everything that you've ever had in your long-term memory, right? If you think about what you remembered, which is kind of a difficult mental exercise, but if you try to simulate the things that you remembered when you were 10, those are probably different from the things you remember now. You don't remember as many things from when you were 8 and 9 now as you did when you're 10, right? So it's relatively permanent, in that if you are kind of nurturing these memories and thinking about them more often, or they were more impactful, they might have a better chance of sticking around. But it's not inevitable that things are just going to decay with time. But as we talk about long-term memory, like I said, it's useful to make some distinctions between different types of memories. So one distinction might be between semantic and episodic memory. Semantic memories are memories of principles, facts, knowledge, ideas, those sorts of things. Episodic memories are memories for the specific events in your life. You might think about those events as episodes that are part of your episodic memory. So using kind of a similar example, a semantic memory might be that hot objects burn skin. You know intellectually that anything that's hot, if it's hot enough, it's going to burn skin, right? So that is semantic. It's a fact. It's a principle about hot things. An episodic memory might be you thinking about a specific time you burned yourself on the stove last year. That is an event from your life. It's related to that semantic memory, but it's also separate because it's about something that happened to you, not just an abstract sort of idea. Semantic memories tend to be a lot stronger and more durable than episodic memories. It's easier to remember these very simple relations between things, a link between the idea of heat and the idea of burning and the idea of skin. That is relatively simple. But to remember all the details of a particular event that happened to you is much more difficult and seems to take up, not take up much more space, but seems to require a lot more associations and connections than just this abstract set of ideas. A related thing to mention here, we'll talk about a couple different types of amnesia later, but one very common thing we would refer to as amnesia that we all experience frequently is forgetting when, where, or how you learned something. So source amnesia, again, forgetting how you learned, generally semantic memory. So you might know, for example, that cheetahs are the fastest animal on land, right? But you probably don't remember when or where or how you learned that. You probably learned it when you were a small child. Maybe you learned it from a zoo book or a parent or a nature documentary or something. And you don't know probably where you learned facts like that. So that is an example illustrating how episodic memories tend to be more fragile. The semantic memory, the fact that you learn, remains. The episodic memory, when you learned that fact, has decayed. So those semantic memories are sticking around even when the related episodic memory is gone. Um, and this applies to a lot of other things in your life too. Things like not remembering where you heard a particular idea, like on the news. You might say, "Wow, I think I saw a headline that told me X," when you're talking to someone, but you don't actually remember when or why or how you heard that. Just know that you heard it. So it's episodic memories tend to fade relatively quickly. Another distinction that we can make is between declarative memories and procedural memories. So the things I've talked about up to this point in long-term memory, these semantic and episodic memories, these are declarative. Another way you might describe them would be explicit or conscious memories. We can contrast that with procedural memories. These are usually memories of how to do something, but often they're things that you can do without much attention or awareness. So something like playing the piano, walking downstairs, typing, tying your shoes. Eventually, for most people, if you learn one of these things, it becomes procedural. It's not something that you describe in words like, well, here is how you play this song on piano. Let me describe it to you in sentences. It doesn't really work that way. It is an experience that you have and a set of kind of implicit unconscious processes that are going on to help guide you do something. Like when you ride a bike, you're not generally thinking right leg down and forward, now left leg down and forward, now right leg down and forward, and I need to keep this straight and turn a little bit and keep my balance and move my center of gravity. You're not thinking about it that way because you don't need to. It is an automatic process that you are calling from memory. So again, these declarative memories we'd be more likely to call explicit. Procedural memories are a type of implicit memory. Declarative memories generally are going to be things that you kind of learn all at once. Either you remember something that happened to you immediately, or you remember a fact that someone just told you. But procedural memories are going to build up over time. Your ability to play piano doesn't happen in a moment or a day or even a year. It's something that happens with practice, something we maybe would refer to as like muscle memory. That's something that builds up over a long time. Declarative memories, once they are lost, once they're forgotten, they're difficult to recover. You need to relearn facts that you have not used in a while. So if you take a statistics class in your freshman year, and then you take a research methods class that uses statistics in your junior year, maybe you've forgotten those statistical facts, and you have to relearn them all over again because you can't really recover them. But things that are easier to recover, you hear people say it's like riding a bike, because it's hard to forget that even if you don't use it, that type of implicit sort of procedural memory can come back very quickly with a little kind of reminder to your mind and body. The kind of flip side of that, though, is that declarative memories, because they're things that participants and research subjects can report very easily, it's really easy to study declarative memories. Procedural memories are much more difficult to study because they're all things that you have to study indirectly. They're things that you have to have someone engage in some sort of process, like playing the piano or walking down the stairs or something like that, and observe things about that process and how good people are at it and things like that. So the ways that you might test explicit memory are generally going to be relatively straightforward. But there are still different ways to do it. So free recall is one way to test people's memory of something. And this is where you don't have any cues. You're just asking somebody to tell you about something. So to use analogies that might be germane to our understanding as students, short answer or essay tests are analogous to free recall. Yes, they're giving you some small cue, but for the most part, they're asking you to pull things out of your mind without that much prompting. Cued recall is a little bit different, responding to things with hints or guidance. So, if you are given a picture of someone and asked who it is, that would be cued recall. It's not giving you examples of who it might be, but it's giving you visual cues to who that person is. Recognition is different. That is choosing something that's correct, recognizing the right information. So the analogy here would be multiple choice tests, that you're asked a question, maybe about a definition for a term, and you look at the different definitions provided, or if you're given a definition, you look at the different terms provided, and you recognize which one of those things fits with the other. Finally, this is a little more like a method of testing memories rather than just like a type of question. But the savings method is, again, a more complex way to test how much someone has learned something, basically. So what the savings method is essentially is seeing how long it takes someone to relearn something. So if you give them exposure to material and see that they have gotten some kind of mastery over it, and then you wait a little while and have to teach it to them again, if they learn it faster the second time, then that would indicate that they have some memory of the first time. But if it takes them a really long time to learn it the second time, then it seems they have lost more. There's not as much savings there that in their memory. So the savings method is really just kind of a little more abstract, comparing how fast somebody can relearn something as an indicator of how much they remember. In the next video, I'm going to move on to talk about how we remember and finally wrap up with how we forget.